Welcome to the Living Ageless and Bold podcast. Each episode, I bring you amazing women who inspire, educate, and share their experiences and journeys along the way. So grab a glass of wine or a cup of coffee, find a cozy spot, and let's relax and have some fun hearing what can be accomplished after 55. Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of Living Ageless and Bold. I broke the rules today. My guest is not over 50, but she is a pop culture expert, and we are going to talk about all things pop culture over 50. So I'm really excited. Rachelle Bergstein, she's a lifestyle writer, an author, an editor, all about pop culture, families. She's been in the New York Post, the New York Times, NPR, so she knows what she's talking about. She's written 3 books, Women from the Ankle Down, The Story of Shoes and How They Define Us, which I really want to talk about. Brilliance and Fire, A Biography of Diamonds. And this is where she hooked me for the interview. The Genius of Judy, How Judy Blume Rewrote Childhood for All of Us. And when she sent me an email, we've all read, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And it changed our lives. So Rachelle, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. So how does one become a pop culture expert?
Well, you have to love it, right? I mean, I am a pop culture junkie. I listen to new music still. I watch all the TV. My husband's obsessed with movies. I, of course, love books. So I think it just was kind of a natural marriage of my professional life, which is writing and editing, and my personal, how I spend my time, which is just gobbling up pop culture.
Yeah. And I don't want to start with your third book, but I want to start with your third book because, like I said, Judy Blume defined us. I mean, she really did. We didn't have a ton of books when I was in 8th grade. I mean, that book we all read, and we didn't really talk to our moms about our periods and stuff. I mean, that book was our Bible. So what did you learn from it? Talk about, it rewrote our childhood for us.
Judy is such an unbelievable pioneer. And, you did tell your audience, I'm not over 50, I'm 43, just full disclosure, but I also grew up with Judy Blume. And so one of the fascinating things to me when I went into this project was how Judy Blume has remained important across multiple generations. So from when she started publishing, Margaret came out in 1970. The kids who were reading the books then, they got passed down and down, sometimes literally, to children who grew up in the 80s like me. So, she has defined many, many years of life for young people, and especially for young girls. And when I set out to write the book, I just wanted to know what it was about Judy's work that made it so sticky as compared to other writers who were writing at the same time and writing about brave things. What was it about her that when you say, like you said, the name Judy Blume, like people just melt. It's like almost like they're talking about like a long lost friend or a former
like an old
boyfriend
aunt
or something.
That's
yes,
what
exactly.
I think of her,
an old aunt. Like
yeah.
People get really emotional, and I just wanted to know what that was.
I was reading some notes on it, and I guess I didn't realize, like you said, she was a pioneer, but her books were banned in the 80s.
They were. I mean, one of the things that many of us who love Judy Blume love about her was her willingness to talk about things that people weren't talking about in real life or in literature, right? Talk about menstruation, talk about sexuality, talk about losing your virginity, talking about masturbation. I mean, she really went there in so many different ways, and she did it in ways that were not scary. They were accessible. Kids really felt so relieved to see what was going on with their bodies reflected in a book. But not everybody loved that, Groundbreaking people aren't always welcomed into the culture. That's just generally something that we see across the board. So, especially in the 80s, when you saw a really big rise of the conservative movement through the religious right, people were saying, these books are not appropriate for children. And she faced a lot of pushback.
Well, and for the younger people who are listening and watching, you're probably like, what are you talking about? We all know about sexuality and periods and menstruation. Well, we didn't. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have computers. We didn't have cell phones. So you had your friends and you had Judy Blume. That
yes.
was it. if you grew up, and many households didn't talk about that. It was just kind of a, here's your pads and your tampons. They're in the bathroom when you're ready, and you took the class in school if your parents signed off on it. But that was it. That was how we learned about that stuff.
I think that's such an important point, and I tried to underscore that in my book, which was that we didn't have the encyclopedia in our pockets. We weren't able to just look something up and say, oh, that's what that is, or that's why that's happening. You had to rely on, like you said, sex education in school if you were lucky enough to have it. If you had parents who were open with you, if your mom threw a puberty book at you at some point, you could refer to that, but it was really, really, really different.
Yeah. I think of my daughter's 24 and we talked about everything, but I also pulled an iPad out and was like, This is what's happening. So it was nice to have that visual. So why do you think Judy Blume is still so popular today, since we do have access everywhere else? What makes her sticky?
Well, that is the special sauce that is Judy, right? So she's talking about these really cutting edge topics that nobody was writing about, but she's doing it through really accessible, kind of timeless stories about young children. Judy Blume had a really special knack for channeling her younger self and filling stories with the kinds of like real life details and true to life experiences that made kids really trust her. And of course, for this project, I went back to all of my Judy Blume books and I read them, some of them with my son, who's now 9. And they hold up. That was the best thing. It was like, these books are actually really good and they are timeless, even despite the ways in which our world has changed. Kids are still fighting on the school bus. They're still questioning what their parents' choices are, how they're going to impact them. They're still looking around in middle school and high school and thinking, I don't know if I agree with the general thrust of what's going on in my town. These are real experiences, no matter whether you have cell phones or the internet or not. So she's also extremely funny. I read some of her books geared to younger children with my son, and he was bursting out laughing at the same things that I remember bursting out laughing at when I was his age. So they hold up in a lot of ways. And I do think it's that special combination of being so bold, but also so real.
Is she still alive? I'm thinking I'm 58 and read it when I was 13.
She is. She's 86 or 87, and she's still like biking around Key West. She's running a bookstore, so she is going strong.
Yeah. Did you speak with her for your book?
I didn't get the opportunity to speak with her, but she did fact check my book. So she knows about it. She signs off on what it says. So, we did have kind of like a very quiet partnership on it.
That's awesome. Okay, let's talk shoes, because shoes are a big part of a woman's life. And I love the name of the book, Women from the Ankle Down, the story of shoes and how they define us. So how do shoes define us? And how did COVID change that? Well, let's talk about shoes in general, but I feel like COVID changed everything, that we're all wearing sneakers now all the time.
COVID changed everything. Okay, so my theory in that book, because I also love fashion, so I write about pop culture and I write about style. My theory in that book is that the style of shoes have evolved to reflect women's changing roles in contemporary American society. So through the 20th century, we saw so many enormous technological innovations in shoes, to be frank, and then combine that with the increased social mobility of women. And you got a lot of different styles that reflected these changes. So starting in the 1930s, you see like the Ferragamo creates the cork wedge, which like changes women's ability to wear platforms with comfort. And then later in the 1980s, you see women like busting through the glass ceiling and running boardrooms, and they're wearing stilettos. They want to be elevated. They want to feel strong and sexy. And I wrote about all of that. So it's a little bit of women's history. It's a little bit of style history, and it was great fun to write. How did COVID change footwear? So much, right? Like, women that wore pencil skirts to the office and high heels were wearing leggings and sneakers all the time, right? Because you weren't going anywhere. But I will say I'm starting to see people dress up more again, and I'm starting to see people wear less practical shoes. I know practical is a bit of a dirty word in footwear. I do love my practical shoes because I'm a mom running after a kid, but I think we're starting to see people have a little bit more fun with fashion again. What do you think? Do you think that's true?
It's a good, as I'm sitting here in my cute top and my sweatpants, but, but I've always done that, this was pre-COVID. This was my life. This was my work. And my husband would come home. We always thought that was so funny. Like if anybody could see what you have on, your shorts or your,
I love it.
But I wonder, like I miss dressing up. I miss going out and, I don't always want to wear sweatpants. And I'll have to ask my daughter. She's 24. She does go into the office and she has to dress for work. I wonder if they think of that as, I have to get dressed up, or does it still have that confidence power thing when when you look good, you feel good?
I'd be so curious because I also work from home and I do love to dress up, but I find myself wearing the same pair of jeans, 5 days a week because I'm like, well, no one's going to see me. Right?
And
these are comfortable.
Exactly.
I might like run around the block to do some grocery shopping or whatever, but yeah, it's not the same. Although I do it up when I'm actually going somewhere. I do still enjoy that.
And you talked about stilettos, and I do. Like when I speak, I have two pairs of fabulous shoes that stay in the box, and I invested a lot of money in them. But I feel fantastic. They're Stuart Weitzmans. It's like when I wear those shoes, I feel good.
Yes.
So there's something about that.
The stiletto is sort of an interesting oxymoron from a fashion perspective, right? Because you do feel really tough when you wear them, although they objectively limit how mobile you are. So this is like something, I think about a lot because a lot of women's fashion, it's both, quote unquote empowering, but also restricting. So, I think stilettos, no one's ever really able to figure it out. It's like, yes, they elevate you. They change the way you hold your body. You feel confident, but you also like couldn't run as fast, if you needed to get out of a bad situation. So I think stilettos are, I think for that reason, they come in and out of fashion. I think it's complicated.
What do you see the fashion trends for women over 50? I mean, I know you're not over 50, but you write about it. You write about fashion in general. And I mean, I feel like I know we're not our mother's 50s, 60s, 70s. We're definitely not our grandmother's 50s, 60s, 70s. And I had asked one of my fashion people, can I still wear a bikini? Because I can still wear one. Is it okay? She's like, if you want to wear one, wear one. But what do you see with fashion trends for women this age?
I think what I'm seeing is the rules are there are no rules anymore. I think it's like all of these ideas that you have to just kind of like put your body away or cut your hair or put your sexuality away. Like they're just not true. And I think women are really starting to push back against that. And I love that. I think that we're seeing women feel comfortable reflecting their personal style much longer into their lives now. And yes, maybe there's competition. Like I don't like my lower belly or I don't like my arms or whatever, but it's like, I think women are still really trying to feel great about themselves, and that extends to fashion. And I also think, for instance, when it comes to footwear, there are so many better options now. I think that so many designers are making shoes that are both maybe not great for your feet, but better for your feet, that are wearable past your 20s or 30s, that also look kind of cute, that they don't look orthopedic. So I really love that. I think Naturalizer, Echo, like these brands are making really nice shoes.
And you talked about that. It was a Ferragamo who created the wedge. That's the most brilliant invention ever. Because
totally,
you're gonna wear a wedge all day. Like that's totally doable. And that's mainly what I buy now. But I'll never forget. I was in my 20s and I had a girlfriend who was very fashion forward, and she said, "Oh, you always want a little heel because it makes your legs look better."
I love a little heel. I agree. Like I feel good about myself with a little bit of extra height, and I'm pretty tall. I don't know. There's something about it though that just makes me feel empowered again, and hard to deny that,
How do you see shoes having gone through the generations? Like you were talking about, like the 30s, I think of like the Leave It to Beaver era, and then you've got the 70s and then the 80s and the 2000s. Like tell us kind of the history of shoes and how they relate to women.
It's not really a straight line. It's not like, heels kept going up, right? Like it swings back and forth. Fashion is cyclical and women's roles are cyclical. And, in the 1920s, like a kitten heel was popular. And then during the war years, when there wasn't a lot of access to frivolity or fashion, women started wearing more practical shoes, right? Because you could only have a certain amount of shoes. There was actually rationing on shoes during World War II. So I know. So if you could only have 2 or 3 pairs of shoes, you're going to pick the ones that are the most universal, right? You're not going to pick a stiletto that you can't wear to work, right? In a factory, for instance. And I think our ideas of what's powerful to women have changed, right? So in some eras, the idea of a pointy, dainty heel is considered powerful. And then in other eras, like the 90s, when I was a teenager, women were wearing very chunky, clunky, large, sort of conventionally unflattering shoes. I'm thinking like Doc Martens, like combat boots, like Converse, Chuck Taylors, because they wanted to communicate something different. They wanted to communicate like, I am not a sex object. I am powerful in a different way. So I think it's all really entrenched with what we're valuing as a culture at that given moment, And I think now as we see a return to gender roles, traditional gender roles, like through a more conservative, administration, I'm wondering what that's going to do to shoes. If it's going to make daintier shoes in fashion again, if we're going to see more 1950s era styles, or if there's going to be a real pushback from the fashion industry and, women wearing, again, like clunky shoes that aren't conventionally sexy. I'm so curious to see.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it all comes back. My mother gave me a pair of Etienne Anier shoes, beautiful burgundy with very pointy. Which now is a little harder to get into with a bunion, but that's a whole nother topic that we can go on. However, they're beautiful. And, so I never got rid of them because they do come back. And, you've got the boots with the pointy toes and then the boots with the round toes and
completely.
And the other thing is with this administration is because I live in the DC area, everybody has to go back into the office.
Right.
So does that now create new fashion trends for, and is it a little more casual than it was pre-COVID?
Well, and I also wonder if it's a little bit more, state to state, district to district, city to city, right? Because I think DC is generally when it comes to fashion, more conservative than say New York, right? Because people are working in politics and they want to project a certain vision, whereas New York's a little more arty, a little bit more edgy, So, it'd be really interesting to see.
Yeah, fascinating. That'll be your second book.
Yes.
What happened to shoes post-COVID?
Totally.
Okay, let's talk about diamonds. All girls love diamonds. I took my daughter into Harvey Winston. Is that what it's called? Harry Winston.
Harry Winston.
I think because we were in New York, I think she was 10. I said, all little girls should see beautiful diamonds. So what made you want to write a book about diamonds?
So I wrote Women from the Ankle Down, and I was like, what are some other things that women love and that get dismissed as frivolous? And my way into that book was the diamond engagement ring. Why is the diamond engagement ring still a thing? Why do women with all of the, again, the power, the economic mobility that they have in culture when I started writing that book, it was like 2013, right? Why do we still kind of melt when someone gives us a diamond ring? Why does that symbol still have so much power? And I came across the marketing campaign that made the diamond engagement ring a thing. And my mind was blown. Because to me, I thought that this was a tradition that dated back to, the medieval knights, right? Like that in castles in Europe, the knights were getting down on their knee and chivalrously asking a lady to marry them with a diamond ring. But this is not the case at all. This is what the diamond industry wanted us to think when they started a marketing campaign as recently as 1947 to make the diamond engagement ring a unavoidable part of the engagement ritual in United States culture. And they did it.
Who did it? What was the campaign?
It was paid for by De Beers, which, if you know, De Beers owned at the time 90% of the world's diamonds. And it was enacted by a advertising agency called NW Air. And this is like real life Mad Men stuff, women who worked at NW Air were given the diamond account because the men were like, well, this is girly stuff. This is for the girls. And the woman who created the slogan, Diamonds Are Forever, was named Frances Garrity. She was a copywriter, a woman working in late 1940s and early 1950s New York. She was single, she was childless, and she was assigned the task of creating a tagline for the diamond campaign that they were about to run in major magazines. And she stayed up all night and she couldn't think of anything. And she just wrote at like 4 a.m, Diamonds Are Forever. And she brought it into the office and her boss told her it wasn't good. He was like, I don't even know if that's grammatically sound, but it was too late and they had nothing else to go with. And
wow.
She created, I get chills just thinking about it.
I just got goosebumps.
Right? The world's most indelible advertising slogan. And it almost didn't run. And the campaign was so thorough. It wasn't just print ads. It was, at one point, they employed a woman. I'm going to blank on her name because I wrote this book a while ago. But they employed a woman to go to schools and give lectures on the importance of diamonds. And, it was about the advertising agency, along with De Beers, they had a mission, and it was to create an engagement ritual. And it had some historical precedent here and there, but it wasn't as entrenched as it is now. And that was thanks to this marketing campaign. So once I realized all that, I was like absolutely hooked on this story. And there is so much fun historical detail about diamonds because they weren't actually all that rare. So what we think of diamonds as being really rare, really special, having all of this economic potential, it's sort of all false. That said, they are really genuinely, objectively beautiful. So, I loved researching this book. It was so much fun.
Oh my gosh. No, and I had no idea. And then, but so you wonder like what marketing does to make people, diamonds are forever, but who were the first guys who said, oh, I need to go buy an engagement ring? Like how did that stick? What was that stickiness of the ad campaign?
It wasn't just, the first ads that De Beers ran for this campaign were, they were very flowery and poetic, and like they did exactly what I said, which is they made you feel like this was like an age-old, timeless tradition, right? And then they also had an education component. So one of the things that market research had showed in the 1950s was that young men, when wanting to go buy diamond rings for their sweethearts, they didn't know what they were doing, right? They had no idea how to buy a diamond or how to ask questions about a diamond or what they were looking for. So what we now think of as the 4 C's, that was actually created by the diamond industry to give people language to talk about diamonds. It was all just like so intentional. And that just blew me away. It's brilliant. There's just like so much human brilliance involved in marketing this stone. And so guys slowly started to learn how to talk about diamonds and understand that they were required to shop for them if they wanted to get engaged. And young women also were educated to believe that they were to receive a diamond if a guy was serious. And this is a tradition that has, it's floundered a little bit in recent years. Some people have moved away from the diamond and moved on to other stones, but the bones of the tradition, giving a ring along with the engagement, are rock solid.
Wow. And now you have, because again, my daughter's 24, so I'm in that age group, is the manufactured diamond.
Yes.
So these girls are getting the big, big rocks. I'm like, how are they affording that at 20? And then I found out that they are, the homemade diamond. They're gorgeous. You can't tell. If you looked at it, if you're a diamond connoisseur, you probably could. But I think for the average person, you can't tell the difference.
It's actually very hard to tell the difference. This was when I was writing my book. Again, it came out in 2016. So when I was writing it, this was like a huge reckoning within the diamond world. The natural diamond industry really pushed back against the idea of lab-grown diamonds, and they continue to do so to some extent. There are campaigns to convince buyers that natural diamonds are the way to go, and they do have advantages. But lab-grown diamonds are now more a part of the industry than they were at that time. The industry has sort of reluctantly accepted them as a part of life. And I guess they've sort of embraced the idea that if people are shopping for diamonds in general, that's still a good thing.
Interesting. So what happened to Frances? Did she get promoted? Did she ever get a cut of any of the big diamond explosion?
She did. She stayed at her job. She continued to work as a copywriter. But I did find a quote from her where some of the like honchos at the ad industry, after like 25 years of service, they all got gold watches. And she was like, "Where's my gold watch?" Women in business were just not as valued. And so, she never made it to the top of the chain where she was getting a gold watch upon her retirement. She didn't get fired. She got to work as a copywriter instead of a secretary, which at that time was a big deal.
I guess was a big deal.
But no, she was not celebrated in her lifetime. Maybe towards the end of her life, I think that she got to see a little bit of people appreciating the impact of that tagline, but no, she was not given the keys to the Oval Office or anything.
Or even give her a diamond.
Nope.
Yeah. If it was, wow. Just a culture, again, this is your expertise to see, how it was then, and that would never happen today.
Yes.
The woman would be recognized for it. Okay, so you've written about shoes, you've written about diamonds, you've written about Judy Blume. What's next?
What is next? So my Judy Blume book was a lot about the feminist movement, and that was sort of like a motif throughout the whole book. Right now I'm working on an idea that would pick up the thread of the feminist movement in the late 70s and early 80s, but without the Judy component. So it's still in its early stages. I don't want to say too much because I have to like really commit, but I'm excited about it.
Oh, that sounds like a fascinating topic.
Thank you.
That time in our lives. I mean, I was a little girl then, but I have, fleeting memories of that time. Wow. So let's talk about pop culture for women my age.
Yes.
What do you see? What do you see? Give me your pop culture definition of a woman in her 50s.
I guess I'm coming at it from the perspective of an article I published in Washington Post this fall, which was about the rise of perimenopause in pop culture. So much like we never talked about menstruation before Judy Blume, people really have remained very quiet about perimenopause and menopause in pop culture. It has been something that women have felt like they needed to endure on their own, that women have felt very isolated in their symptoms and felt like maybe they're weird because they're going through something that nobody's talking about. And now all of a sudden, the women are talking. They're talking on social media. Celebrities are using their platforms to talk about perimenopause and menopause. And it's busting through this incredible cultural taboo, right? We're seeing women say, okay, I am in menopause, like Halle Berry went to the Capitol and announced, I am in menopause. And this is a sex symbol. This is a sex symbol of decades saying, I'm in menopause and I'm still powerful. I'm still sexy. I'm still hireable. And this is a big deal. And we're seeing it happen in so many different directions. Like for that article, I interviewed the comedian Samantha Bee, who did a comedy show it's called How to Survive Menopause. And I actually saw it in the city. And it's all about the crazy stuff she went through as her hormone levels started declining, right? And trying to figure out what was going on with her doctor and how she suffered for years before she actually said anything to her gynecologist. And she just thought she was going crazy and that she had a stressful job. And all of a sudden she hated her family. And her doctor was like, oh my God, you're in perimenopause. You need help, right? So, we're seeing people talk about the symptoms. We're seeing women above 50 being represented in pop culture. And I'm not really talking about like the J-Lo's here because J-Lo's like on her own island, but I'm talking about like Demi Moore in The Substance, like, right? Bodies change and it's something that we have to adapt to and it's okay. And the culture is going to have to accept aging women because it's disgusting not to. And, Miranda July in All Fours, this novel that went viral, she's talking about how she's going to accept and enjoy the second half of her life, what kind of choices she's going to make, knowing that she's not technically in her youth anymore, what kind of choices she's going to make to really live her life to the fullest. Like, these are conversations that we have as women in private, but now they're starting to happen in public.
Which I love. Have you seen the M Factor film yet?
No, I haven't.
So that my very first guest was Jo LaMarca Matheson. She's one of the co-executive producers with Tamsin Fadal, and it blew up. So it's all about, it's shredding the silence on menopause. And when you watch it and you hear from these OBGYNs who were never taught about menopause, never,
I know,
in medical school. And this is the thing that blows my mind. And Jo and I are friends, and we've talked about this. Every single woman in the world who has ovaries still, she hasn't had a hysterectomy, will go through menopause. Yet we're not talking about it.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I spoke to Mary Jane Minkin at Yale. I don't know if you've heard her name, but she is one of the preeminent menopause doctors. And she was saying it's a crime what has happened in women's medicine, that menopause funding for menopause education within the medical schools just disappeared. It dried up. Only now are doctors starting to get trained in it. There is a supply and demand issue because women are starting to realize, I'm in menopause, I'm in perimenopause, I'm having symptoms, and there are only a certain amount of doctors who are trained to actually help. So hopefully that will change too, because that's a really big deal.
Yeah. And I definitely recommend for everybody listening and watching at this age, watch the M Factor film. And I'm going to have Jo and Tamsin on again to talk more about it, because they're having screenings all over the world. Women are finally I can talk about this. It's streaming on PBS. So wherever you get your PBS, you can find it. It's excellent. And I'll make this all come full circle to everybody with the Judy Blume. So imagine nobody ever talked to you about getting a period, about menstruating. And you're 13 years old. And like me, I'm at the movie theaters with my girlfriends and I get my period, and all of a sudden you're bleeding and you think you're dying. Well, that's kind of what menopause is. Nobody has talked to us about the symptoms. And like you said, Samantha Beach thought she was going crazy and losing her mind. And we don't have to live this way. And I love that you brought all this up, because that's, women now over 50, we don't have to just brush it under the rug. We can have conversations about it and get help.
Totally. And pop culture has enormous power, right? Once you see celebrities talking about things, once you see representation on the screen, once you see people writing about these things, it opens up a floodgate where everybody in their living rooms or reading on the subway or whatever it is like, oh my God, I need to talk about that too, or I need to see my doctor, or I need to ask my friends. And it breaks down the boundaries, which is awesome.
Yeah, I love it. Oh my gosh. Rachelle, thank you so much. This was really fun, really cool. Every time I've made an exception for my not 50 guests, they're fabulous. So thank you for joining me, and best of luck with your next book.
Thank you so much for making the exception, and thank you for having me.
Yeah. So everybody, it'll all be in the show notes, but check out Rachelle's books. They all sound fabulous. I'm going to get all of them and read them, and follow her. She's doing a lot of, like she said, the Washington Post, amazing writing about pop culture. And thank you. It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening or for watching this episode of Living Ageless and Bold. If you haven't already, please make sure you hit subscribe. And if you like the episode, I hope that you will give us a great review. You can also head over to livingagelessandbold.com and sign up for information, inspiration, and exclusive opportunities for us, women over 55. Thanks for listening. And remember, no matter what you do, keep living ageless and bold.